Honorable members of the committee, I see a quorum. Conformément à l'article 100.
Pursuant to Standing Order 1061, as clerk of the 1063, as clerk of the committee, I will now preside over the election of the chair.
The clerk of the committee can only receive motions for the election of the chair. The clerk cannot receive other types of motions, cannot entertain points of orders, nor participate in debate. Pursuant to Standing Order 1062, the chair must be a member of the official opposition for this committee. Je suis prête à recevoir les motions.
I am ready to receive motions for the chair.
Good morning, Madam Clerk and colleagues. It's great to join you back at the Standing Committee on Access to Information, Privacy and Ethics to continue the good work that we do here, and congratulations to everyone on their election. Madam Chair, I'd like to nominate my colleague, John Brassard, for the position of Chair of this committee.
Y a-t-il d'autres motions?
Are there any other motions?
I will put the question. It has been moved by Mr. Barrett that Monsieur John Brassard be elected chair of the committee. Is it the pleasure of the committee to adopt the motion?
It is.
Carried. I declare Mr. John Brassard duly elected chair of the committee and invite Mr. Brassard to take the chair.
On the chair. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Thank you to the committee members as well. Et bienvenue à toutes les.
Welcome to all of the new members, Mr. Thériault, Ms. Church, Ms. Lapointe, Mr. Saini, Mr. Sari. Welcome to our committee. I think that the clerk will now move on to the election of the vice chair.
Conformément à l'article.
Pursuant to Standing Order 1062, the first vice chair must be a member of the government party. I am now prepared to receive motions for the first vice chair.
Saini first.
Saini from the riding of Fleetwood Port Cal. I would like to nominate Linda LaPlante for the position of vice chair for the committee.
Thank you. So Mr. Saini moved that Ms. Lapointe be elected first vice chair of the committee. Y a-t-il d'autres motions?
Are there any other motions?
I will put the question. Mr. Saini moved that Ms. Lapointe be elected first vice chair of the committee. Is it the pleasure of the committee to adopt the motion? It is. Carried. Vice-président. Conformément à l'article 106.
Pursuant to Standing Order 1062, the second vice chair must be a member of an opposition party other than the official opposition. I am now prepared to receive motions for the second vice chair. Ms. Lapointe? Good morning, Madam Clerk. Good morning, everyone. I would like to nominate Mr. Thériault as second vice chair. It is moved by Ms. Lapointe that Mr. Thériault be elected as second vice chair of the committee.
Je vais maintenant mettre la question.
I will now put the motion to the committee. It is moved by Ms. Lapointe that Mr. Thériault be elected as vice chair of the committee. Is it the pleasure of the committee to adopt the motion?
Okay, félicitations, Monsieur Thériault.
Congratulations, Mr. Thériault and Ms. Lapointe. Before we start,
Ask all in-person participants to consult the guidelines written on the cards on the table. These measures are in place to help prevent audio and feedback incidents and to protect the health and safety of all participants, including our interpreters. And you'll notice that there is a QR code on the card which links to a short awareness video. And so thank you, Madam Clerk. I would also, if it's appropriate, like to invite the analysts up to the front. Is that appropriate at this point?
Yeah, we can proceed to the adoption of the written motions, and the first one is about them. So if the committee wants, then
perfect. First of all, I want to welcome back Nancy as our clerk. Nancy has done a great job in the past keeping us all in line, so we're glad to have you back, Nance. And you'll get lots of correspondence from Nancy, and I encourage you to read them all because all of them are important, as you will see. So we are going to go to routine motions. Now, I was hoping that we could adopt these as an omnibus issue, but I know that everybody is in agreement with them, but I've been advised by the clerk that in case any future amendments are required, it's better that we do read them on an individual basis. So we're going to have to go on that manner. So if we want to start, if anybody wants to propose these motions, Madame Lapointe, si tu veux commencer avec...
If you'd like to start with the first motion, please, for the analyst services. We're looking at routine motions? Yes. And you can read each one, but we'll start with the analyst services. Analyst services, that the committee retain as needed and at the discretion of the chair the services of one or more analysts from the Library of Parliament to assist in its work. Shall I continue? Does everyone agree with that motion? Perfect. Second one? Mr. Barrett.
Subcommittee on Agenda and Procedure, that the Subcommittee on Agenda and Procedure be established and be composed of 4 members, the chair and 1 member from each recognized party as designated by each party's whip, and that the subcommittee work in a spirit of collaboration.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Barrett. The second motion on Subcommittee on Agenda and Procedure. Everybody in agreement with that? Yes. Oui, tout le monde est en accord? Okay. Et je veux...
I would like to welcome our analysts, Maxine and Alexandre. Welcome to our committee again.
The tremendous analysts provided us with great information for all of our meetings, very diligent in their work, and so I'm glad that they're part of the committee as well. So welcome. Thank you. Okay, la troisième motion.
Third motion, please, meeting without quorum. Ms. Lapointe? Meeting without quorum, that the chair be authorized to hold meetings to receive evidence and to have that evidence published when a quorum is not present, provided that at least 4 members are present, including 2 members of the opposition parties and 2 members of the government party. Thank you. Is everyone in agreement with that motion? Thank you.
Don't mind.
Travel, that when traveling outside the parliamentary precinct, A, the meeting begin after 15 minutes, regardless of whether quorum is present. B, no substantive motion may be moved during such meetings.
Okay. Everybody in agreement with that one? Okay, thank you. Les temps pour allouer...
Time for opening remarks and questioning of witnesses. Ms. Lapointe? That witnesses be given 5 minutes for their opening statements, that whenever possible, witnesses provide the committee with their opening statements 72 hours in advance, that at the discretion of the chair, during the questioning of witnesses, there be allocated 6 minutes for the first questioner of each party as follows. First round, Conservative Party, Liberal Party, Bloc Québécois. For the second and subsequent rounds, the order and time for questioning be as follows. Conservative Party 5 minutes, Liberal Party 5 minutes, Bloc Québécois 2.5 minutes, Conservative Party 5 minutes, Liberal Party 5 minutes. Thank you, Ms. Lapointe. Is everyone in agreement with that motion? Mr. Thériault? Mr. Chair, I made the same request at the Health Committee. I would like to ask for your flexibility. I know that this is something that has been discussed between parties. I would like to raise today that during the previous parliament, there were 2 parties that were sharing speaking time at the first and second turn, and during the second turn, the NDP had 2.5 minutes. They were only about 20 MPs, and Conservatives have given me some of their speaking time in the past. And so I'm asking for flexibility, because a second turn with only 2.5 minutes there's not much that can be asked, and I believe that all parties can ask very relevant questions. We do our own research, and it's good to be able to take advantage of everyone's expertise. And sometimes a question that hasn't been asked might be asked by me, but I need to be able to have the time to do so. And so that's why I'm asking all of you for flexibility, and perhaps we could assess this on a case-by-case basis, but perhaps, depending on the case, of course, have perhaps 4 or 5 minutes in a second turn, and then it could be 2.5 minutes for any following turns. Because that's how the time was shared last time as well. Thank you, Mr. Thériault. In my experience at this committee, we have always given more time to Mr. Villemur. We've done that with the NDP as well. I would propose that we not change the routine motions, but during committee meetings, I could speak with the other committee members and perhaps award you with more time to the block during committee meetings. That's what we were able to do in the past. Sometimes we have witnesses for 2 hours, and we started the clock again in order to give more time to the bloc and the NDP. We want to encourage all parties to take the time to ask questions and to be able to have discussions. And so if that's agreeable to you, I promise that I will make time for you. Is that all right? Thank you. But I think that everyone agrees with that. Michael? Thank you.
Okay. Mais merci pour...
But thank you for making the point. So, page 2, document distribution. Ms. Lapointe, please. That only the clerk of the committee be authorized to distribute documents to members of the committee, and only when the documents are in both official languages, and that all documents submitted to the committee in both official languages that do not come from a federal department, members' offices, or that have not been translated by the Translation Bureau, be sent for linguistic review by the Translation Bureau before being distributed to members, and that the witnesses be advised accordingly. Okay, thank you. Does everyone agree with the motion? Okay, thank you.
I don't know why I left this one to you, but...
That the clerk of the committee, at the discretion of the chair, be authorized to make the necessary arrangements to provide working meals for the committee and its subcommittees.
Okay, thank you. Just everybody in agreement with that motion? Okay, just make sure if there's any dietary restrictions or requirements to let the clerk know, if you don't mind. We try to accommodate as much as we can. Sometimes what happens in the later hours, we'll have meals, but in the earlier hours or later hours, we might have snacks, cheese, soup, all that stuff. But over lunch period, we'll have a meal. Okay, so just want to make sure that everybody's dietary restrictions are fine. Are accommodated. Prochaine, le frais de déplacement.
Up next, travel, accommodation, and living expenses of witnesses, Ms. Lapointe. That, if requested, reasonable travel, accommodation, and living expenses be reimbursed to witnesses, not exceeding 2 representatives per organization, and that in exceptional circumstances, payment for more representatives be made at the discretion of the chair. Okay. Does everyone agree with the motion? Yes?
Finally, for access to in-camera meetings.
That, unless otherwise ordered, each committee member be allowed to be accompanied by 1 staff member at an in-camera meeting, and that 1 additional person from each House officer's office be allowed to be present. That during in-camera meetings, committee members may be informed by the committee chair of the MPs who have been designated as substitutes for permanent members in order to know which MPs are authorized to speak and vote during these committee meetings, that only those who have been recognized and identified as such be authorized to speak in keeping with the usual agreed rules of order and decorum.
Okay, tout le monde est en accord?
Yes.
C'est la...
Does everyone agree? That was the last motion.
Before I go to Mr. Barrett, I just want to advise the committee members that other committees have been requesting that reports that have been done by past committees get a response back from the government. There are two studies that we submitted to which we did not get a response back from the government because of prorogation. So I would like, and Michael's going to propose a motion on this, to have the government respond to the report. So I'm going to go to Michael for the motion. Go ahead, Mike.
So I do have those two motions that I flagged for you, Chair, but I have additional routine motions that we didn't adopt. And sorry, Mike.
Before that, I might have jumped the gun here on the routine. So
We did access to.
okay, I don't know if I had that one. Did I? Okay, have you got the transcript? Sorry, we're going to have to go back to.
Mr.
Wait.
Mr. Chair, we don't continue that motion first?
Oui, exactement, parce que j'avais pas d'autres pages. C'est pour cette raison. Oui, pour moi, c'est un page.
Yes, I did not have those pages. That's why.
The next one is transcripts of in-camera meeting on routine motions. Avez-vous la motion? Okay.
Do you have the motion, Ms. Lapointe? That one copy of the transcript of each in-camera meeting be securely retained by the committee clerk for consultation by members of the committee or by their staff, and that the analysts assigned to the committee have access to the in-camera transcripts. Okay, thank you. Does everyone agree with that? Okay.
Notice of a motion.
That a 48-hour notice interpreted as 2 nights be required for any substantive motion to be moved in committee unless the substantive motion relates directly to business then under consideration, provided that A, the notice be filed with the clerk of the committee no later than 4 p.m. from Monday to Thursday and no later than 2:30 p.m. on Friday. B, the motion be distributed to members and the offices of the whips of each recognized party in both official languages by the clerk on the same day the said notice was transmitted if it was received no later than the deadline hour. C, notices received after the deadline hour or on non-business days be deemed to have been received during the next business day.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Everybody in agreement with that? Okay, and finalement.
And finally, orders of reference from the House respecting bills. Ms. Lapointe, please. Thank you. That in relation to orders of reference from the House respecting bills, A, the clerk of the committee shall, upon the committee receiving such an order of reference, write to each member who is not a member of a caucus represented on the committee to invite those members to file with the clerk of the committee in both official languages any amendments to the bill which is the subject of the said order, which they would suggest that the committees consider. B, suggested amendments filed pursuant to paragraph A at least 48 hours prior to the start of clause-by-clause consideration of the bill to which the amendments relate shall be deemed to be proposed during the said consideration, provided that the committee may, by motion, vary this deadline in respect of a given bill. And C, during the clause-by-clause consideration of a bill, the chair shall allow a member who filed suggested amendments pursuant to paragraph A an opportunity to make brief representations in support of them. Okay, does everyone agree with this motion? Okay, thank you.
This is Michael. This is the next one.
That the clerk inform each witness who is to appear before the committee that the House Administration Support Team must conduct technical tests to check the connectivity and the equipment used to ensure the best possible sound quality, and that the chair advise the committee at the start of each meeting of any witness who did not perform the required technical tests.
Okay. Everybody in agreement? Wait. Madame Lapointe.
Ms. Lapointe, whips access to digital binders. That the clerk of the committee be authorized to grant access to the committee's digital binder to the offices of the whips of each recognized party. Does everyone agree with that? Okay.
Maintenance of order and decorum. Michael? Huh? Non, si tu veux, madame.
If you wish, Ms. Lapointe. We have a lot of order and decorum at this committee. Okay, if you want to go do that, go ahead. Thank you. Maintenance of order and decorum, that during meetings, the chair, if necessary, uses his prerogative to suspend the meeting to maintain the order and decorum necessary to ensure the application of the House of Commons policies on workplace health and safety. Thank you, Ms. Lapointe. Does everyone agree with that? I think that is the case.
Motions. Thank you, Mr. Barrett. Merci, Madame Lapointe. Like I was saying, other committees have requested that previous reports get a response from the government. And there were two reports that we did in particular in the last Parliament. Because of prorogation, we never got the response back. And I'd like, I think Mr. Barrett would like to move a motion in regards to that. Mr. Barrett, go ahead, please.
Okay, thanks, Chair. So just as a matter at hand, as it's our first meeting, and for the reasons that you outlined, that given that committee members, staff, the clerk, analysts, and witnesses worked hard to produce the report entitled Federal Government's Use of Technological Tools Capable of Extracting Personal Data from Mobile Devices and Computers during the first session of the 44th Parliament, and given that the government did not table a response because of the prorogation of Parliament, the committee deemed that it has undertaken and completed a study on federal government's use of technological tools capable of extracting personal data from mobile devices and computers pursuant to Standing Order 108, and that it adopt the report as a report from this committee. Pursuant to Standing Order 109, the committee requests the government table a comprehensive response to the report and the chair present the report to the House. And I have a second, but I'm not sure if you want to deal with them independently.
I would rather deal with them independently, if that's okay. So
Okay.
on the first report, do we have any questions? Go ahead,
Mr. Chair,
Madame Lapointe.
can we have
Oh,
written in both languages?
did we not send that through? No. Okay,
Because if we want to study it, we would like to have it
okay.
written, please.
Monsieur Thériault, est-ce que ça c'est la même question?
Mr. Thériault, did you have the same question?
Can we get those two motions sent to the clerk for distribution? Yeah. So in the meantime, why don't I suspend for a minute or two to give the clerk enough time? So we'll do that, and we'll come back. Okay. that order, I will say that this is a teaching lesson for all of us, some of us, that if you're going to propose motions, make sure that they're proposed and sent in both official languages so that we don't have further delays. All right. Mr. Barrett, before we left, has read the first motion. It's been circulated among committee members in both official languages. Are we in agreement with the first motion? We are? Okay, so that first motion passes. Oh, we're not?
No.
Oh, okay, I saw a head nod, okay. So, do you have any discussion, Ms. Church?
Absolutely.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. While I recognize the probably very good work that the committee members, staff, clerk, and analysts have put into this report, certainly as a new member, but I think also as a new parliament, I feel it's certainly incumbent on myself to familiarize myself with the report before we adopt it as a report from this committee and on behalf of this committee. So I would certainly prefer to have an opportunity to review it and review its recommendations before we adopt it and send it beyond here.
Okay, fair enough. I appreciate your comments. The motion is on the floor. Any further discussion on this? No? Okay, so I'm going to go to the vote. I assume that we don't have unanimous consent on that. Would you like a recorded vote on whether we adopt this motion or not?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you.
Juste,
Yeah, that's okay. We're gonna come to the vote on the motion. Monsieur Thériault, s'il vous plaît.
Just a question. From what I understood, the report had been adopted. If the report was adopted by the committee and its prorogation that caused there to not be an answer, it's not up to the members of the committee to come back to a report that had been previously adopted by members. We want to ensure that the work of the committee, because they had adopted their report, they should be able to follow up on their motion and the report, and there always needs to be a response from the government. So you can read the report, receive a response, and if we wanted to do more work, or we could do that. But as new members, I don't think that we should vote on a report that was already adopted, because that's negating the work that was done before. We don't want to lose the work that has been done. There should be continuity from one session to another. It's up to the different parties to choose who's going to sit on a committee, but the committee has already done the work. Chair?
S'il vous plaît.
Go ahead. I agree with you that when a committee does the work, there needs to be continuity, but I would invite you to read the motion that was sent to us. The committee is asking the government to table a response, but before that, it states that the study was finished, but it was not adopted. And so I want to come back to that. What we're asking, or what's being asked in the motion, is that the study was finished and we want to adopt the report. But what my colleague is asking for is just the time to examine the report. The studies were finished, and we've only been at this committee for a week.
Juste, Monsieur le Président.
Okay, oui, allez.
J'ai tout de même.
Mr. Chair, Are we talking about a report that had been adopted? I was told that yes, the report had been adopted. And after hearing what my colleague had to say, it hadn't been adopted. Perhaps we need to change the wording in the motion for it to reflect reality better.
Oui, peut-être tu peux poser une question à la Guerfrey.
You can ask the question to the clerk, and she will be able to answer you. Madam Clerk? Thank you, Chair. The report in the motion is report number 13 for the 44th Parliament. We went through the study, the report was adopted, and the report was tabled in the House, and we requested a response pursuant to 1069, and there was prorogation and an election, and so that work was lost, and we did not receive a response, and that's normal. So the motion currently is a typical motion that is often adopted in order to re-adopt work completed by the committee. This is a new committee, and so the motion seeks to re-adopt the report as is, table it yet again in the House in order to request a response from the government. Does that answer your question? That does. And so, yeah, my point remains. Thank you, Mr. Thériault.
And again, similar to what other committees have done as they've formed, and given the past work that they've done at committee, in several cases, reports were presented as this one was and as the next one was to Parliament, and we did not receive a response from the government. So all this does is to seek a response to a report that was already presented. You know, there's no nefarious thing going on here. It's just the first report that we're looking at was proposed by Mr. Villemure. The second report was proposed by Ms. Khalid and adopted by the committee, and the recommendations adopted by the committee and presented. So that's what we're asking for here. So, okay. Any other discussion on this? Go ahead, sir.
As a new member, I am not familiar with the work that was done, and I would like to have some time to look at the work that was done before I can agree to vote on it.
Okay. I do appreciate that. Like I said, the work was done by the previous committee. The motion that's on the floor right now is to ask the government for a response for a previous report that was adopted by the committee in the last session of Parliament, and then to get that response back. So, okay, go ahead, Ms. Church. This hasn't really been a problem at any other committees. I'll tell you that right now. Like I've been at most of the committees that have adopted these similar motions, and it hasn't presented a problem. So go ahead, Ms. Church.
No, Mr. Chair, I really do appreciate that. I'm wondering, is it possible to move to suspend the consideration of this motion till we've had the chance to even look at the reports that we're talking about and address this at our next meeting?
We can, you can make an amendment to the motion to propose that, and then we can have discussion on that, and then if there's agreement to that, we can do that. But you're well within your right to amend Mr. Barrett's motion to reflect what you just said. So if you want to do that, I'll give you a second to consider that. I could go to, it's Mr. Sarré. Mr. Sarré, if you want to consider that, or if you want to do that right now, you have the floor, Ms. Church. And just a reminder to all committee members that that anything that comes through, all discussion comes through the chair as well, just so, we obviously have crosstalk discussion, but I just want to make sure that everybody is familiar with that. I know some new members to the committee, so go ahead, Ms. Church.
Well, Mr. Chair, I would take that opportunity then to move an amendment to the motion to suspend this until our next meeting, once we've had a chance to review the reports in question.
Sorry, Ms. Church, you want to just say that again for me, if you don't mind?
I just said that I would proceed to suggest an amendment to the motion that we can suspend this until our next meeting to allow an opportunity to consider the reports in the interim.
Okay. Okay, so, sorry, so Ms. Church has an amendment to suspend this report until the next, or the asking of this until the next meeting of the committee after they've had a chance to review the report. Sur l'amendement,
On the amendment, I see Monsieur Thériault.
just on the amendment. Mr. Thériault.
Bon.
Mr. Thériault, is the amendment receivable? Is it in order? One moment, I'm going to speak with the clerk.
Mr. Thériault,
Mr. Thériault, the amendment is in order, and we can proceed to debate. So the amendment is aims to suspend
suspension of this committee to not deal with this until the members of the Liberal Party, or all members, get to see the report and then have a discussion when we come back. So it is in order and it's amendable. So go ahead.
Moi, je...
Well, my point, my argument was that I do understand the intentions of Ms. Church, but it is based on something that cannot happen. If someone tells me I want to be able to read before accepting, it means that it also implies that they may not accept. But that is a bit of an issue given the customs and traditions of the House, because some work was done, and I've been here for 9 years, and a lot of work went to the trash, if you want, because there was a prorogation or elections, and it is normal that we are able to go back and get that work back. And when this comes before a committee, we can receive a summary from the analysts of the work done before, which is what I did for most of the documents that are before us today. So I insist on the fact that we cannot do this because it implies that we might be able to say, no, we do not accept this. That's it, because otherwise there's no reason. We trust the committee that did some work which was adopted by the Parliament. It's no small feat. MPs adopted a report. All that's missing is the government's response. And I'm new here, and I can say the same thing, but what I'm doing is, no, I have faith, I have confidence, and I vote for the adoption of this report. And when you vote in the House for the adoption of the report, you are deemed to have learned about the contents of it. So I know that I cannot ask for the vote, but had I not taken the floor, I would have asked for the vote.
Okay, so as I mentioned, the amendment is in order. We're having discussion, and j'apprécie votre
And I do appreciate your take on the amendment.
next on the amendment. Mike, do you want to speak on this, or no?
I was going to say, prior to Ms. Church moving the motion, Mr. Chair, that perhaps, if the desire was to not deal with the item, that you could invite a motion to adjourn debate, which would be dilatory, and then we'd be onto it. But we've got the amendment in front of us, and so I'll leave it to you to manage that.
I'll leave it to the members if they want to do that. I have to deal with what's in front of me, and the amendment is in front of me, so I don't have any further discussion. Ms. Church, on the amendment?
Mr. Chair, I want to comment on my colleague's intervention because I do believe that it is our privilege as members to understand what we are voting on. And although it may be convention that we examine the work that was previously done by a prior composition of the committee, the fact is that we have had a new parliament established. It is our responsibility as members to understand what we are deeming to be put forward from our committee. At this stage, I mean, we are minutes from having adopted standing procedures for this committee that suggest that we should have minimum of 48 hours notice of motions on substantive items, of which this is. I do not for a moment deny that it sounds to me as if the subject matter of the report is one that is probably of interest to this committee. However, I have absolutely no bearing at the moment to understand what that report was, and there is not a binding requirement that a committee puts forward materials that were created in a past parliament. So, I don't want to impede this committee's work, but I do feel quite strongly that for a motion that wasn't presented to the committee on material that we are not presented with and do not have access to and have no knowledge even at the moment as to whether the two reports we're considering are the be-all and end-all of the committee's unfinished business from the past parliament. Maybe there are others. I have no knowledge as to how the member opposite here has even, or has brought forward these particular reports for consideration. It seems to me to be a reasonable request that we reconsider this once we've had the chance to look into these actual reports. Without any knowledge of the content in them, why are we putting it forward and deeming that this is going forward in our name?
Okay, so maybe I can try to clarify a little bit here. So this particular report and the one that presuming that we'll be dealing with afterwards, or maybe not, was adopted by the committee in the 44th Parliament first session. It was presented to Parliament. There were no all of the recommendations were adopted. They were agreed to. There was no supplementary report by any other members of the committee. There was no dissenting reports at all. So what we're simply asking for now, and as I said earlier, this has been a pattern, if you will, on other committees, and all of them have been accepted unanimously without any dissent at all, to have those reports that were presented by the chairs of the committee in accordance with all the standard practices, to have a response back from the government. So those reports have already been adopted by the previous committee. So, as I said earlier, every other committee has been asking for this. Given the fact that prorogation, there's no hidden agenda here. It's the committees did work. They adopted recommendations as a result of that work, and now they're asking for the government to respond back on the recommendations and on those reports. So that's what's been going on here for the last week. So I don't know why it's a problem here, but anyways, I'm going to go to I've got you on the main motion. Do you want to be on the amendment? Because we're on the amendment right now, so I've got you on the main motion. I saw your hand before, Mr. Serre. So you were on the main motion, but we're on the amendment now. So I can put you on the list because I've got Mr. Hardy, Mr. Terrier, and then you. So, Monsieur Hardy.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. En fait, la question...
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So there was a comment. So there's nothing hidden. There's nothing that's not publicly available. So coming here today to say that we're not aware, it's not really right. You can access these documents on the website of the government as we speak. Mr. Theriault. I understand the intention. I understand that the Conservative members could also accept that this be done later, but we have a deadline or a period of 120 days for the government response. When we come back in September, we'll already have the response. But if we do not adopt it today, it will get pushed to April because they will still have 120 days to respond. And the people who did the work, they want the answers to be received. So if we adopt it now, we'll have the answer back in September when we come back. So at that point in time, we would be able to say, okay, do we do another study? Do we put our efforts and energies on something else? That's the issue. We're delaying the working of the committee for a period of 120 days.
Monsieur Sarré, est-ce que tu veux parler sur la...
Mr. Sari, do you want to speak to the amendment? For the amendment, I have a question that is about the procedure, not the content. I did not know that the content was available on the website. We didn't really have a lot of time recently to go on the website and to dig into the contents of the reports that are on there. But once again, on the motion as you presented it, I think there are elements of it. I do not really fully agree with how it was presented. So in terms of the procedure, yes, these studies were completed and you're asking us to adopt this work. I'm coming back to the motion as it is worded. So I'm not comfortable really with that, with adopting. That is what I come back to, and I support my colleague's amendment on that.
It's an amendment that's been or a motion that's been adopted by almost every committee this week. So there's nothing that has changed. Right.
But you're asking us to adopt it, so it's in the text of it.
Ms. Church after that.
So, Mr. Chair, let me try and get this straight. The convention of, I'm new to Parliament in a sense, and certainly new to committee. But I'm a bit of a nerd. I enjoy going through the websites and doing the homework before arriving for work. So let me get this straight. Monsieur Theriault had articulated how in the initial report we have a 120-day deadline to provide for the government to respond to the report, which would allow for us to continue committee business properly and in earnest in the fall, which I think is the intention of every member around this table. That because some colleagues across the table have not done their due diligence and their basic homework, which is part of the obligation of being a public office holder, that we're now looking to find a way to beg for time. I know we're in a new parliament, we have a new government, but I'm curious if this is going to be the same tactics of the previous government in this new parliament. This, I think, is a good faith gesture to continue on the work that the committee had started in the past in a way that all other committees in Parliament have been taking on the responsibility to do the work. This strikes me as speciously obstructionist at a point in which we should be focusing on the business of Parliament, the business of the people. And, if the Carney government chooses to employ the same tactics of the Trudeau government and relitigate these old issues by using procedural delays and ignorance as a foil, then that will be very unfortunate.
Thank you, Mr. Majumdar, Ms. Church, and then Mr. Sayani. On the amendment.
Mr. Chair, I appreciate that the members opposite may have had advance notice of the motion that they brought forward and the studies that are considered therein, but to the best of my knowledge, on this side of the table, we received the motion during the break in this committee only a few moments ago. And I think we are really interested in getting down to business with the work of government. As a point of clarification, maybe I would address this question to the clerk as to whether or not, to Mr. Thériault's point about the 120 days, does this require a retabling of the report? And if so, would that occur now, or is that more likely to occur in the fall, in which case we're on essentially the same timelines as to whether or not we were given an opportunity to actually review these reports before being asked to report on them?
I'm going to allow the clerk to clarify that. I don't believe it requires a retabling of the report. The motion is, go ahead, Madam Clerk.
So, yes, if the committee adopts the motion as it is now, the chair would have to present the report to the House again. That being said, the report has already been prepared, so it's not like we have to review all of the report because it's already written. So it would be a one-pager report with the report attached to it. So it doesn't take, it normally does not take long to prepare, for us to prepare, and the tabling could most likely take place this week.
Which I would do tomorrow during routine proceedings.
Most likely.
Very likely. You still have the floor?
Well, Mr. Chair, it doesn't change my view that I would like an opportunity to review the reports, and that's where I would sit on this.
Okay, thank you. I've got Mr. Saini. Go ahead, please.
As a new member, I have some difficulty when my friends say it's the same tactic as Trudeau government. I was not part of Trudeau government. I am a new member. My responsibility is to make sure the work that I do, that I am responsible for that, rather than getting into the tactics of liberal Trudeau's. And this is what we hear in the House of Commons every day. Trudeau is not the Prime Minister. We have a new government, and I'm part of that. Thank you.
I don't have any other discussion. Oh, wait, Monsieur Thériault, sur l'amendement, s'il vous plaît.
Mr. Thériault, on the amendment, please. Okay. Let's try to present objective arguments and not political ones. Because if we start with the political arguments, we will lose control of this. So, as a member of this committee, what interests me is a response from the government. And if I was a new member, and I am a new member, and if reading the report is one thing, but not having a response from the government doesn't help me to know how I will do my work here when we come back in September. So I'd like to have the response as quickly as possible and have both bits of information at the same time. That's what's at stake here. I need to have the bigger picture so that we can say, okay, we do a study on that, or we don't do a study on that, because the government did a good job responding. But now we're in this void, and that's what's at stake here. And I understand, but it's the wording that's super common used at the House here. I have come across instances where sometimes I have some trouble with the wording of such things, but it is what we have to find ourselves in this current position. It's the wording as it is. We're not going to change it. This was adopted by committees, and it's been years that this exact wording has been in circulation, and it means what it means. Unless you want to go ahead and change that, it is also possible, but that would need to be done for all committees. So I understand that we are here, we're doing a serious job, and I would like to know what I'm agreeing to, but you are agreeing to having an answer from the government to have the big picture, and you will have whole summer to read that, and in September, I believe the government response we will already have it, and we'll be able to continue our work. That is what I suggest as a way for interpreting what we're faced with, because here it's not about insulting people. It's about working together. Okay, thank you, Mr. Thériault, for your remarks.
I don't see any further discussion. So the amendment is to hold off until September. The from the motion so that we can revisit this in September. That's the amendment that's on the floor right now. So I'm going to ask if we have unanimous consent on that, which I always do, and if we don't, then we'll go to a vote. No unanimous consent? Okay. So we'll have to go to a vote on the amendment, Madam Clerk, please.
So is the term of the amendment clear to everybody? Yes. Yeah. So on the amendment by Ms. Church. Ms. Church,
In favor.
agree. Madame Lapointe.
Oui.
Mr. Saini.
Yep. Yep. You just have to verbalize it.
Thank you.
Monsieur Sari. Mr. Barrett. No. Mr. Majumba.
No.
Monsieur Hardy.
No.
Monsieur Thériault.
No.
Yeas 4, nays 4, pour 4, contre 4.
Okay, so I vote no.
Yeas 4, pour 4, nays 4, 4, non.
Okay, so now we're on the...
5, sorry, 5.
Okay, so the amendment is defeated. We're on the motion presented by Mr. Barrett. No further discussion on that. Do we have consensus on the motion presented by Mr. Barrett? We do? Okay, thank you. So that motion passes. Mr. Barrett, if you want to present the second motion now, I'd invite you to do that, please. Just a reminder to committee members that we do have to go, there are some other business we have to deal with as well.
That given the committee member staff, the clerk, analysts, and witnesses worked hard to produce a report entitled Oversight of Social Media Platforms Ensuring Privacy and Safety Online during the first session of the 44th Parliament, and given that the government did not table a response because of the prorogation of Parliament, the committee deemed that it has undertaken and completed a study on oversight of social media platforms ensuring privacy and safety online pursuant to Standing Order 108, and that it adopt the report as a report from this committee. Pursuant to Standing Order 109, the committee requests the government to table a comprehensive response to the report, and the chair present the report to the House.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. The motion has been moved, and I'm sure Ms. Khalid would be very happy if we receive a response from the government on this. Any discussion on this? No? Do I have agreement? Consensus? Okay, thank you so much. That motion carries.
One of many motions that will get consensus at this committee.
I'm sure we will. So there is some other business that we have to deal with. Members of the committee are aware of a third-party ATIP request that came in. An email was circulated, and any discussion on this should take place in camera. So I'm going to ask the committee if they're in agreement to go in camera to deal with. Mr. Barrett?
I just have a question, if I may.
Yep, go ahead.
It is a requirement that this item be dealt with in camera. Is that correct? I just want to be clear.
If there's discussion.
I just want to be clear always about our reasons for going in camera.
Right. There is a requirement that this be dealt with because it deals with information that is privy to the committee.
Okay. Well, then I would. Do you need a motion?
I need
Chair?
a motion to move in.
So moved.
Or consensus. Okay. So we're going to suspend for a couple of minutes while we prepare to go in camera. Thank you.